Welcome to episode 174, originally published on the 10th of October 2025. All history, all psychology, all philosophy, all art except music, all medical knowledge except the purely anatomical and physical, every book and picture and statue that could remind Germans of the old time must be destroyed. As Halloween now sprawls out to encompass an entire month, people begin to enjoy and share their favourite scary stories as soon as the 1st of October rolls around. This week's episode remains squarely focused on science fiction, but of a particularly terrifying kind. Published in 1937, Katharine Burdekin's Swastika Night is a chilling depiction of a far-future fascist dystopia, in which the triumph of Nazism also represents oblivion for humanity and freedom. This is emphatically not a fun novel, but a unique and important one. The Hitler wins scenario is a popular fixture of alternate histories. As the Science Fiction Encyclopedia puts it, it's long been an enjoyable creative exercise to imagine the dark consequences of an Axis victory in World War II. Swastika Night is something quite different. This deeply bleak novel is set 700 years after Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan have defeated the Allied powers and sought to annihilate all traces of the past. This extraordinary novel was written long before the war in 1935 and then published in 1937. Although credited to the pseudonym Murray Constantine, Swastika Night was actually written by Katharine Burdekin, who lived from 1896 to 1963, a British writer of fiction for children and adults. She was only unmasked as the true author in 1985, over 2 decades after her death. This chilling novel is not an alternate history, but rather a terrifying vision of a fascist future history, written when Hitler had only been in power for a short time. Looked back on today, Swastika Night can be seen as a precursor to George Orwell's 1984 and to the feminist dystopias from later writers like Margaret Atwood, Susie McKee-Charnas, Suzette Haden-Elgin and Joanna Russ. The novel also remains troublingly relevant in an era of resurgent fascism, and still serves as a powerful indictment of that ideology as a vile dead end for culture, freedom and the human spirit. The novel is set in Germany and Britain 7 centuries after the end of the 20-year war, which can be thought of as an imagined version of World War II. During that conflict, Germany and Japan conclusively defeated the Allied states and divided the world between them. The two Axis powers have been at war intermittently for hundreds of years, with neither able to defeat the other. Swastika Night has a tight focus, built around just 3 characters and very heavily weighted towards dialogue. It could be adapted quite neatly to the stage. The main character is Alfred, an Englishman who works as an aircraft engineer. When the novel opens, he's visiting Germany on a religious pilgrimage. The religion in question is Hitlerism, a warped cult of personality which reveres the long-dead dictator as a statuesque, blonde, blue-eyed Superman, and the divine representation of victorious force. Alfred reunites with Hermann, a strong but naive and ignorant farm labourer who idolises the Englishman after the two met in England years earlier. Alfred and Hermann meet Friedrich, who serves as a knight, a kind of warrior priest of the fascist religion, and a government functionary. Friedrich shows Alfred and Hermann 2 extraordinary items which his family has guarded for generations. One is a book written by an ancestor, and the other is a photograph. These 2 objects are relics of a past that fascism has almost completely destroyed. Having learned shattering truths about the past, Alfred and Hermann become custodians, tasked with protecting the tiniest, frailest spark of possibility of a better future. Swastika Night comprises a startlingly dark vision, told in a matter-of-fact way. The world is dominated completely by a supremely evil regime, which has almost totally eliminated even the notion of resistance. The novel represents a dire warning about Nazism and imagines its logical endpoint should it be allowed to grow unchecked. Within this dystopian scenario, Burdekin imagines an incredibly fragile grain of hope. All three of the characters are literally Nazis, steeped in the fascism which is the only worldview they have ever known. They are also the only possibility of change. Much of the novel is taken up by an extended dialogue in which Friedrich discusses Germany's social system with Alfred. For the reader, this illuminates the precise nature of this dystopia. For Alfred, it introduces to him the alien idea that things were once very different, centuries ago. Burdekin pays particular attention to the dire status of women, who in this Reich are treated essentially as cattle. Heads shaved, deprived of all possessions and rights, they live in open-air cages and have no social role outside reproduction. Swastika Night is in part a devastating feminist dystopia, more extreme than many examples published decades later. The man most responsible for the Hitler cult declared that, quote, women were not part of the human race at all, but a kind of ape. In this benighted scenario, all social, technological and cultural progress has long since come to a halt. Because Nazism forbids any deviation, permits no difference, there can be no productive interaction or cross-pollination of ideas. For this reason, technology remains at a level equivalent to the 1930s, despite the passage of 7 centuries. Fascism, Burdekin appears to state, may lionize movement and action, but its inevitable endpoint is instead a deathly stasis. One of the most chilling aspects of the novel is the Nazi regime's broadly successful effort to shrink the range of permissible or even imaginable human emotions. Compassion and empathy are virtually extinct in the novel's scenario. This brings to mind the efforts of today's extreme right, who are prosecuting their own war on empathy. As a novel, Swastika Night has its flaws. It's uneventful and based overwhelmingly on dialogue. Its characters are products of their environment, and as a result they all hold and express appalling views. For better or worse, Burdekin rarely shows the elements of a dystopia, but rather has her characters describe and debate them at length. In this way, the novel lacks the directness of later dystopias from Orwell to Atwood. The sheer comprehensive terror of Burdekin's imagined future world has a real power, however, and it's one that's alarmingly relevant for a novel published in 1937. It's grimly fascinating to read Burdekin's nightmare future, written just as fascism was solidifying power in 1930s Germany. As the extreme right rears its ugly head again, Swastika Night is sadly more relevant now than it has been for some time. Thanks for listening. For more classic science fiction reviews, visit andyjohnson.xyz. You can also find the show on YouTube and follow updates on Blue Sky. In both cases, just search Classic SF with Andy Johnson. Finally, to get in touch, use the contact form on my site or hit the link in the episode description to send a text message.